Before marble gods and marching legions, there were coastlines, narrow, stony, stubborn, where mountains leaned over the Mediterranean and the sea answered with a tireless breath. On those ledges of earth, a people learned to treat the horizon like a road. We call them Phoenicians. They did not seek to rule by land, or to carve frontiers with armies. They learned the tides, watched the wind, studied the evening star, and made the water itself their map. Their homeland was not wide. Ridges rose quickly from the shore, squeezing fields into thin ribbons. The cedar forests above gave them timber. The sea below gave them passage. From Byblos to Sidon, from Tyre to Arwood, each city kept its own ruler, its own pride, its own harbor. Rivals in trade, partners in necessity, siblings who argued loudly but spoke the same language of boats, cargo, and weather. What they lacked in farmland, they gained in harbors. Stone quays, wooden masts, the creak of rope, this was their wealth. When the Bronze Age world faltered, palaces burned, trade routes broke, great powers stumbled, the Phoenicians stepped into the quiet with something other empires did not have: mobility. Their ships were their strength. They sailed close to the shorelines when prudence demanded it, cut across open water when weather allowed, and planted trading stations like stepping stones across the sea: Cyprus, Sicily, Sardinia, Iberia, and farther still. In time, one colony would grow into a force of its own. Carthage, the daughter city that learned to speak with a mother's voice. But beneath the arithmetic of commerce, timber for gold, glass for grain, dye for silver, lived a second economy, one made of stories and signs. The sea was not only a marketplace. It was a shrine. Storms were not mere hazards. They were messages. Safe returns were not accidents. They were favors granted. A voyage began with the sound of oars, and with an offering. Oil poured on the water. Incense curling up from a small brazier. A whispered promise to keep the gods' names in good repair. The world they inhabited taught them how to think. Mountains taught limits. The sea taught scale. Neighbors taught caution. Distance taught invention. They built ships with high prows that cut spray and kept deckboards dry. They learned how to steer by the stars, how to read the color of the water, how to feel a change in wind on the skin before the sail told the tale. On their decks, faith and practice braided together. A charm tied at the wrist, a chart marked with scars of previous storms, a prayer voiced not to conquer the elements, but to coexist with them. You can still sense their logic in the afterlife of words. The Greeks, hearing of their purple dye, called them Phoenicians, the purple people. The murex shells yielded a color that did not fade, a twilight stain that clung to cloth as if it belonged there. That purple traveled with their ships, and so did something more enduring: letters. A compact set of signs, 22 in all, carried by traders because a merchant's ledger has no patience for cuneiform ceremony. When those letters crossed into Greek hands, they gained vowels, crossed again into Roman hands and reshaped Latin, and then kept going until they reached us. Every everyday note, every keyboard line, every title card in your video carries a distant echo of a voice once shouted across a Phoenician quay. They did not leave us epics with their own signatures. History saved their outline by reflection. Neighbors writing about them, rivals borrowing from them, later faiths recasting their gods under different names. Yet absence is not silence. The broken stones of harbors, the cedar beams reused in later walls, the coins with ships engraved, the stele carved with symbols, together they whisper a profile. Not an empire, not a hero king, not a single capital. A network. A culture of connectors. A people who trusted movement more than monument. And that is where our story begins, in the spaces between. Between land and water, between city and city, between fear and skill. The Phoenicians learned to live in those thresholds. Their myths did too. No single sacred book gathers their voices. Their pantheon survives as a mosaic. Lines quoted by outsiders, rituals glimpsed in ruins, names that travel wearing borrowed faces. Yet the outline is clear enough to step into. According to later retellings, some claiming to preserve far older memories, the world was born out of formless waters stirred by a breath of wind. A cosmic egg, a first division into paired forces, a drama of separation and order. These are patterns the ancient Near East knew well. The Phoenician version, born on shorelines that heard the sea every hour of every day, made the ocean the first actor. Chaos was not emptiness. Chaos was a swell that could lift a ship or tear it apart. Creation was not abstract. It was the calming of water, the staking of pillars, the lighting of a fire. From that beginning, gods took their places where human need was most urgent. Baal, the storm lord, was not merely a sky god with a taste for thunder. He governed rain for fields starved of rivers. He governed wind for sails that needed just enough, not too little, not too much. He fought the sea when it behaved like a beast and death when the land turned to stone in drought. Lightning was his signature. Bulls, with their power and breath, were his emblem. Astarte, radiant, never simple, held love and battle in the same hands. In some cities she stood crowned with the crescent of the moon, feet on lions, a queen who protects and confronts with equal grace. In others, she kept her role as patron of fertility and safe births, a goddess to whom women prayed with garlands and men dedicated the first fruits of profit. Her cult could soften into tenderness or sharpen into steel, depending on the city and the season. Astarte did not ask to be confined. Melqart, king of the city, belonged to Tyre as a pulse belongs to a body. He was a traveling god, a builder's patron, and, most memorably, a god who passed through fire and returned renewed. In the rituals of his city, an effigy burned and hope burned with it, not to vanish but to be remade. It is not hard to see why Greeks, meeting Melqart at distant shrines, heard their own Heracles in his story. Endurance, trial, apotheosis by flame. Balat Jebel, lady of Byblos, guarded a harbor so old the Greeks made the city's name a word for book. Her temple received offerings from merchants and from Egyptian envoys. Between cedar shipments and papyrus rolls, she lived as a mediator between cultures. Eshmun, healer of Sidon, promised restoration. Serpents coiled on his emblems not as threats but as signs of shedding and renewal. Reshaped wielded flame and pestilence, proof that the ancients knew power can warm or scorch depending on how closely you stand. Notice how portable this faith is. Fewer colossal statues, more symbols. Pillars that declare presence without a face. A crescent and star that speak across languages. A bull etched into a seal that can be pressed into clay in any port. This is theology designed for motion. A god can oversee a voyage if the voyage has a sign to carry him. And so the myths learned to travel. Astarte, seen through Greek eyes, resembled Aphrodite, though the original remained sharper, more warlike. Melqart became Heracles at shrines in Iberia where Eastern rites and Western stories met and shook hands. Storm gods wore each other's names with ease. Baal to Zeus, Baal to Jupiter, depending on the harbor you entered. If the divinity behind the symbol stayed true, the language could flex. The Phoenicians were never troubled by that. Let the myths play like cinema. Night over Tyre. An open square by the harbor. A pyre stacked in a precise geometry of beams. Priests move with deliberate steps, not theatrical, but practiced. Men who know flame as a tool and a threshold. The crowd watches, a stillness on them that belongs to grief and to expectation. Fire climbs the wood, eats the figure, throws sparks into a sky already seeded with stars. This is the rite of Melqart. Death enacted so renewal can be carried into morning. When day breaks, the smoke thins, and the city breathes as if a knot in its chest is loosened. The god returns because he always returns. Tyre will endure because it must. Sail west with the story. In a shrine near the edge of the known world, Cadiz, ancient Gades, travelers tell of a sanctuary where Melqart and Heracles are the same name in different mouths. The altar burns, the pillars stand, and the god who walks through fire keeps guard over the strait that opens to the Atlantic. Here the Phoenicians mark a boundary. Not a wall that forbids passage, but a sign that says, beyond this, the sea becomes a different kind of question. Shift the frame. Hear Baal's thunder. In one strand of the old tales, Yam, the sea, not as water but as will, demands lordship. Order pushes back. The storm god arms himself with lightning and wind and breaks the claim. The scene does not ask to be literal. It invites recognition. A storm that saves a harvest but breaks a mast is not purely friend or foe. To the farmer, Baal is nourishment. To the sailor, he is negotiation. The myth teaches the posture: reverence, caution, gratitude, preparedness. Then comes Moat, the dry eater. Crops wither, wells fail, prayers turn hoarse. The story says Baal descends, is swallowed by death, and later returns, not immortal but cyclical like rain. Rituals accompany the season. Offerings, lamentations, a choreography of hope timed to the sky. The lesson is not, there will never be drought. The lesson is absence will end. A people who cannot control weather can still control meaning. Now Astarte. In Sidon she's gentle with households. In Tyre she wears mail. Across the water in Carthage she shifts into Tanit. Hands outstretched, sign edged into stone steely that watch over a growing power. Tanit's emblem is spare, a triangle body, a circle head, a bar for arms, and yet it reads as sovereign from a great distance. In partnership with Baal Hammon, she presides over prosperity in a city that learns to speak in fleets. Festivals bloom. Processions move between sanctuaries. The memory of eastern harbors lives on a new coast in a new key. Notice what these stories do. They sacralize rhythm. Fire and dawn, storm and clearing, drought and rain, danger and return. They ask the community to participate, not as audiences, but as keepers. A merchant can give thanks for safe cargo and also remember that safe cargo is never guaranteed. A king can sit for renewal rites not because he is weak, but because power that refuses renewal decays. The myths travel with sailors and shift like accents. On Cyprus, Baal meets local storm gods and shares the sky. In Sicily, Astarte's crescent lives near altars with other names. The plot beats remain, the cast changes costumes, the moral holds. Adaptability is not a betrayal. It is fidelity to function. A traveling people keep what works and trade what can be improved. Their gods do the same. Walk through their visual language the way you would walk a gallery. A bull pressed into a seal. Horned, compact, ready to move. Not an illustration to admire, but a stamp to mark goods, a wish for strength that leaves an imprint on resin and clay. The bull belongs to Baal, but also to an idea. Vigor under harness, energy made useful. A lion carved in flank pairs beside a threshold. Astarte stands upon lions not as a hunter, but as a ruler who has negotiated with power and convinced it to stand guard. When such lions flank a doorway, they do more than decorate. They announce a zone of protection, a space where intention changes. A serpent coiling a staff. The eye registers danger first, then remembers shedding, the sudden grace of new skin. In shrines of Eshmun, the serpent belongs to healing, to skill, to the human willingness to try remedy after remedy until something works. The image travels forward centuries and still stands on ambulances today, evidence that practical signs outlive the prayers that introduced them. Two upright pillars, betyls, cool and silent in a court where flames speak. Pillars as presence. Pillars as the God is here without telling you the face. For a faith that crossed water repeatedly, abstraction was a kindness. A pillar fits on a boat better than a colossus. Color as symbol. Purple. Extracted drop by drop from murex shells. Such dye made fabric that glowed at dusk like a promise. To wear it was not merely to preen, it was to broadcast role. Priest, ruler, emissary. A social shortcut in crowded markets where decisions were time-sensitive and reputations moved faster than ships. And then the artifact that looks least sacred but proved most divine, the alphabet. 22 signs, easy to teach, quick to scratch, efficient to copy. A merchant in a hurry can write an order. A scribe can tally goods without spending half a lifetime in training. This technology of letters changed who could write, and therefore who could think in writing. Greeks shaped the set to their sounds, Romans did the same, and we inherited the habit. Language as a portable tool, not a priestly monopoly. If you want to sense Phoenician legacy without leaving your desk, glance at your keyboard. The echoes amplify. Astarte translated as Aphrodite and later Venus, visible tonight as a white fire over the western horizon. Melqart's fate woven into the labors of Heracles/Hercules, hero of 1,000 posters. Baal Hammon aligned with Saturn in Roman speech. His festivals repointed but never fully erased. The rod of Asclepius, heir of Eshmun's sign, still tells a city where to find help. Seasonal rites absorbed into later calendars still rehearse death and return without remembering which harbor taught the choreography. Even their craft carried meanings. Glass, sand turned transparent by flame, is myth written in chemistry. Cedar shaped into ships is prayer shaped into hulls. Navigation by stars is faith and mathematics in the same gesture. Look up, name the lights, plot the angle, trust the pattern, leave at dawn. In all of it the same thesis repeats. Symbols are tools, tools are symbols. A culture that travels cannot afford to separate them. Walk the ruins of Carthage at sunset and you will understand the echo without words. Broken columns, fragments of stele, the open water glinting beyond, a map of memory. Empires as loud as Rome wrote about this place as an opponent. The stones answer in another register. We were also a shrine, also a marketplace, also a hinge between worlds. Strip myth of ornament and ask, what work did it do? For the Phoenicians, myth was not a museum. It was a set of durable survival tools. Anthropology underlines the fit between environment and belief. A people with little arable land learned to prize rain, wind, and cycles. They did not flatter themselves with control. They negotiated with forces larger than kings, storm, drought, current, by honoring the patterns. Offerings before voyages, rites in dry seasons, festivals at renewal. The stories of Baal and Moat, of Melqart's fire, of Astarte's shifting roles are not so much explanations as they are protocols. Ritualized ways to turn fear into action and action into community. Psychology recognizes archetypes visible from 1,000 cultures. The resurrected hero, the sovereign mother, the stormbringer, the healer with the serpent staff. The reason these shapes worked then and work now is not mystery. It is recognition. We meet ourselves in them, our endurance after losses, our contradictions, our lifelong argument with uncertainty. The myths make those negotiations social. A rite is therapy with drums. A procession is a speech about resilience delivered as movement. History notes their genius for adaptation. Where gatekeeping priesthoods conserve forms, the Phoenicians conserved function. When a god crossed water and changed his name, the purpose remained. Protect the voyage, return the rain, renew the city. That is cultural, cognitive flexibility. It keeps identity by letting surface details shift as needed. In a world where borders are again in motion, digital, demographic, climatic, this is a skill worth learning twice. Ethics lives in these stories, quietly. The myth of a king tied to renewal rites reminds leaders that legitimacy is cyclical, not permanent. The ritual of giving thanks for cargo received encourages humility in profit. The acknowledgement that storms are inevitable restrains the human appetite for blame. A society that sees chaos as a recurring character, not an intruder, plans better. And finally, relevance for us. We live like they did at thresholds. Between technologies we don't fully master. Between global systems that can fail. Between private dreams and public weather. The Phoenicians leave us not a rulebook, but a posture. Make your symbols portable, so your meaning survives travel. Make your stories adaptable, so truth can wear local clothes. Make your rituals communal, so fear has witnesses and courage has company. Their myths endure because they were built for motion. They were never nailed to one mountain or one city. They learned the language of many harbors without losing their accent. You can hear them still, in alphabets that democratized writing, in emblems of medicine, in star names, in festivals that welcome spring with drums and fire. You can feel them in any place where trade becomes culture and culture becomes memory. So when you speak their names, Baal in thunder, Astarte under a bright planet, Melqart in a flame that promises morning, you are not visiting a museum. You are listening to instructions that survived 3,000 years of weather. Sail accordingly. Leave with reverence. Return with stories. Renew what burns. And keep your symbols light enough to carry.